Picture this. You're huddled in the back of a pitch-black transport helicopter, freezing cold, when suddenly you see an RPG floating toward you in slow motion. It literally looks like a sparking lava lamp, just casually drifting through the air, right before it violently detonates inside your cabin. Boom. In a fraction of a second, you're thrust into a completely chaotic, desperate fight for survival.
So, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're digging deep into the devastating tactical errors of the Roberts Ridge operation, also known as the Battle of Takur Ghar. We're going to really focus on how critical command failures, disconnected leadership, and just disastrous communication led to some incredibly tragic consequences for the special operators fighting and bleeding on the ground.
To actually understand how this entire breakdown happened, we really have to look at the immediate physical disconnect that kicked the whole thing off. When that RPG hit, it instantly knocked out all three of the helicopter's separate electrical systems. The fallout from that strike was immediate, and it was terrifying. First, the miniguns lose their power and die. But even worse, the internal intercoms go completely dark. The pilot is suddenly deaf to his own crew. Taking heavy machine gun fire, he instinctively throws the bird into a steep dive to evade. But here's the thing. Because he can't hear anything over the chaos, he has absolutely no idea that Navy SEAL Neil Roberts has just slipped out the open ramp in the back, falling 12 feet into hip-deep snow on the freezing mountain ridge below. Flying completely blind to what's happening in the back, the pilot somehow manages to level off at 9,000 feet using backup systems. And it's only then, when the crew chief literally scrambles forward and shouts over the roaring engine noise, that the pilot learns the horrifying truth. They're missing a man.
Now, while that downed crew crash lands in the valley and waits for a replacement helo, a second and fatal disaster starts brewing. The communication network, which stretches all the way from that freezing Afghan valley to a command center thousands of miles away, completely unravels, all because of a switch in satellite frequencies. This is where a massive, deadly disconnect takes hold. You have what command thinks is happening on one side and the terrifying ground reality on the other. A field artillery major, a guy who had never actually commanded a complex special operations battle before, takes control of the satellite radio, and he fundamentally misunderstands the battlefield.
Within minutes, the whole situation spirals. The confused major completely misinterprets the map, thinking the missing SEAL fell into the valley instead of way up on the mountain ridge. Because of this, he literally almost calls in an AC-130 airstrike directly onto a friendly 101st Airborne mortar platoon. It's an absolute disaster that is only narrowly avoided because the AC-130 pilot heroically intervenes and refuses the order, because he actually knows where the missing man is. But avoiding friendly fire, there was just a temporary fix, because next, the major makes an even deadlier mistake. He broadcast one highly consequential word over the radio to teams that were absolutely unprepared to hear it.
You see, in military doctrine, an assault is a very specific action. It requires overwhelming manpower and heavy firepower to take out an enemy position. But the guys heading back up that mountain, they were a lightly kitted recon sniper team. They were wearing plastic bump helmets and carrying sniper rifles. They were in no way equipped to assault a fortified bunker 5 stories up a snowy mountain.
Yet, unbelievably, the major repeats the word assault 15 separate times over the satellite radio. That single word creates this cacophony of disastrously wrong instructions that just bleeds into the earpieces of everyone on the network.
This relentless loop of assault, assault, assault just perfectly highlights how detached command had become from the ground truth. I mean, the major even tells a female medevac pilot who was flying an unarmed helicopter that her crew of medics are now shooters in this mountain assault. It's just a surreal and terrifying failure of leadership.
So, put yourself in the boots of the guys actually on the freezing ground. Down in the dark, Air Force Combat Controller John Chapman, who is brand new to this chaotic environment, is hearing all this radio chatter bleed through.
Chapman steps off the helicopter into pitch-black darkness, freezing temps, and blinding snow. He's already disoriented from switching helicopters multiple times. But most importantly, he's hearing those frantic assault commands echoing in his headset. Amidst all that noise and adrenaline, he makes a heroic but deeply tragic assumption. He thinks the mission plan has shifted from a quiet recon to a direct frontal attack. Thinking he's just following the orders being screamed over the radio, one man alone breaks from his team. Chapman charges 5 stories straight up the mountain, trudging through a 1.5 feet of snow, running directly at an entrenched enemy machine gun nest.
The team leader, who was bogged down in the deep snow, just couldn't catch him. He later recalled, "He's thinking the plan changed. We're assaulting the bunker and off he goes." Chapman bravely clears a cutout in the ground and fights tenaciously before tragically falling under a withering enemy crossfire from 3 different directions.
Meanwhile, as the sniper team is pinned down on the ridge taking severe casualties, the command decisions 1,000 miles away somehow get even worse. They decide to launch a Ranger Quick Reaction Force, or QRF, completely blind right into the teeth of the battle. And this just brilliantly illustrates the cascading failure of the whole op. These Rangers are rushed onto helicopters with 0 mission briefing. The choppers don't have satellite comms, so they're completely cut off from updates. They don't even know that Neil Roberts fell out of a helicopter in the first place. They are literally flying into a hornet's nest with absolutely 0 situational awareness. And to make matters unimaginably worse, right as these blind QRF helicopters are approaching the mountain on short final, command overrides the tactical setup and orders the AC-130 gunship, their only heavy air support, to pull off and leave the area. Down on the ground force commander sees the disaster unfolding and screams desperately over the radio, "If you leave station right now, they're going to blow that helicopter out of the sky," but it's too late. The gunship leaves, and the incoming Chinook takes a direct RPG hit to the right engine, violently pancaking onto the hot, enemy-controlled landing zone. The Rangers step out of that crashed helicopter straight into a wall of heavy machine gun fire. They take severe casualties the second they hit the dirt. The aircrew literally has to fight to the death on their mounted guns just to defend the fuselage of the downed bird. As the day drags on, the brutal cost just keeps mounting. By the afternoon, a daylight ambush severely wounds a pararescueman, Jason Cunningham. The ground force commander begs for a medevac, but command, who is now totally paralyzed by the loss of aircraft, refuses to send a daylight flight. Because of that horrific delay, Cunningham tragically bleeds to death on the freezing mountain before nightfall. When you look at the aftermath, it is an almost unfathomable tactical disaster. 3 multi-million-dollar aircraft destroyed in the exact same landing zone. A devastating loss of American lives. And at the root of it all, a catastrophic, lethal disconnect between the officers looking at screens thousands of miles away and the operators bleeding in the snow. We close out this explainer the exact same way the men on the mountain did, in freezing darkness. Crammed into the final exfil helicopter, the ground force commander is packed tightly next to a body bag. In the dim blue light of the cabin, he looks down and sees the luminescent green dots of a watch glowing eerily in the gloom. It was the body of Neil Roberts, the man whose fall had started the entire harrowing ordeal. It's an image that really sticks with you, and it leaves us with this haunting, essential question. In an age of high-tech comms and remote warfare, how can we ensure that commanders miles away never lose sight of the ground truth when human lives are hanging in the balance? Really think about that one. Thanks for joining me for this explainer.